Hello, world. What is up? Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Matt Forte. We're here live at the Build Studio in New York City. The new FYI series, From Scratch, is wild, man. After being presented a recipe, right? The chef gives the host a recipe. Then the host then has to hunt, dive, gather, forage, or grow whatever ingredients are needed to remake the meal. Yes, of course, it's entertaining, but it's also a window into the staggering amount of work, craftsmanship, and passion that goes into every single bite you take. Joining me now is actor, producer, adventurer, and host of From Scratch. Make some noise for the great David Moscow. Come on, do it up. Let's go. Make some noise.
Hello, everybody.
Dude, congrats on this show, which is, as I said, entertaining and awesome and such a fantastic adventure that you got to go on and do all these incredible things.
Thank you, man.
I'm so excited.
It was very exciting, yeah.
I can imagine. How are you doing? How's life right now, back being amongst normal folk?
Life is good.
Yeah.
I got a young kid. He's back in Los Angeles, so I got to sleep in today.
Very nice.
It feels like I'm on a holiday. It's amazing.
It's like a little vacation. You just got to do a little bit of work. Well, I'm excited to talk to you, man. This is crazy. Take me back to the beginning. I was reading something that you said it reminded you of your childhood. You were reminded of your childhood, how you would forage for food and things of that nature. I was unaware of this portion of your childhood. Tell me about the inspiration for this show and your story, man.
So I grew up in New York. I grew up in the Bronx, but I spent my summers in Montana and Utah and Maine. My family, my mom and dad would drop me off with my cousins, and I'd run around with them in the mountains, and my grandpa would take us fishing. And then when I was 12 years old, I got the part in the movie Big, and that stopped. My summers were spent on movie sets and, doing TV shows and stuff like that. And so I realized I started missing it. Like, when was the last time I went apple picking? When was the last time I went fishing? And then having a kid, I knew I was going to have a kid. I started thinking about all the things that were amazing from my childhood and how I was so far away from that, coupled with the fact that just the relationship with food that I had, I could get anything I wanted but it would be wrapped in plastic or delivered by Postmates. And there was no more having a garden or fishing. And I felt like that was missing in my life, like just being in the woods or swimming in a lake. That wasn't anything I was doing at the time, and I wanted to change that.
Just in general, how connected did you feel in the kitchen? Were you a guy? Were you cooking a lot? Were you trying out a bunch of recipes, or no? It was this whole thing you just kind of, like most of us, kind of got comfortable and used to what life has become, and then one day you kind of realized, I used to do a lot more than this.
You hit it on the head. I feel like in my mind, I was like, oh yeah, I cook a ton and I try different things. And then I actually looked back at what was going on, and I was working 24/7 and ordering like last second delivery to the house. And that, the ease that we have right now around food has just made any sort of like thought process around it disappear. And we're just, for me, I was just putting stuff in, not really enjoying it on some level. Like, there'd be special nights where you go out to a great restaurant, lay down some money, but in general, it was just sort of like eating to graze while the rest of my life, was going on.
Well, yeah, we're at this really interesting point in time where, like, culturally, I think a lot of people are thinking about or talking about sustainable living and sustainable sources of food and how to eat more responsibly. But while that conversation's happening, we're also providing tools that make it increasingly more convenient and simple to just press a button and give me a salad or something. I just want to eat now, and I don't have time to think about it. So there's like these two kind of moving in separate directions, these forces. So talk about, you have this idea, you wanted to get back into this world. How do you make it a show?
Wow, well, that's so there was another thing that was going on at the same time, which really made it, like, on a personal level, I started doing these meals with friends. That the first step was there was a restaurant reviewer in Los Angeles. His name was Jonathan Gold. He would put out this 99 best restaurants of Los Angeles, and my friends and I started to go once a month to one of them, and we would bring friends, and pretty soon, like 90 of us would roll up into a restaurant and freak out the kitchen staff because they were going to have to cook for us. But at the same time that was going on, so I was getting more involved in sort of like making meals special with friends, because I think that's important as well. There was also sort of politically, there was a presidential candidate who was talking about building a wall, and that felt very like terrible for me. I live in Los Angeles. The Mexican culture is the Los Angeles culture, and for somebody to be talking about sort of like literally cutting off, immigrants or Central Americans in general, it just felt really silly. So I produce films as well. So I said, why don't we do a documentary about how you make a pork chicharron taco? For the local the restaurant that I love is called Broken Spanish. Ray Garcia is an amazing chef, and I was like, let me like deconstruct his pork chicharron taco and a mezcal margarita. And we'll go down to Oaxaca. I'll harvest corn with like subsistence farmers there and really show sort of like how hard it is and how much passion and drive and the struggle to bring food to American tables. And this was just going to be a one-off documentary. And along the way, the agents saw it, and then they passed it along to a couple of big names in the food world, and they said, well, no, this should be a show, and you should target a bunch of different cultures so that it can be sort of like a love story to the farmers and the fishermen and all the people who work really hard so that we can eat well. And that's what I hope we did. I mean, in the end, like what I came away was... I feel like there's a lot of there's certain professions that people agree need to get paid more, and teachers, nurses, and I believe that the people who bring our food to our table are one of those groups, whether they're restaurant workers or they're farmers. And I mean, it is intense, hard work. Our show is I feel like it's a mix between like what Bear Grylls does and almost the dirty jobs that used to be on. Because and I think you're like harvesting wheat or harvesting rice in the Philippines in a rice paddy, in 98-degree weather and the air is thick.
You're out there doing crazy. You're spear fishing for octopus. You're milking water buffalo. Like you are out there in the thick of it, doing all these things. And one, again, it provides that context that I think is so sorely lacking from everything we do. Of like, this is where all this stuff comes from. Two, it's entertaining to see because this is I've never watched anyone do this.
Yeah, it's the medicine in the ice cream. Yeah. The ice cream is the adventure. Like, and that's the fun for me. It's like a bucket list each time. Like. What is it like to spearfish for octopus, like off the coast of Italy? Bananas, right?
What was the scariest thing the most intimidating thing that you had to get out there and do?
Spearfishing for octopus.
The one, yeah, it sounds like it would.
Well, we didn't get it, and then I got caught in some rough waters. The free diver was like, so we caught an octopus, and it was a little baby octopus. And I had it in my hand, and it like crawled up and like sat on my hand. It turned 3 different colors and did like little puffs of ink, and I was like, I can't do that. So then I asked the diver if there was an alternative, and he said, well, there are these sea anemones in the cliffs over here. Why don't we swim over there, and you can try and use those. And in Sardinia, they like put them in some batter, and they fry them up, and they're called oziata, and they're like amazing. So we went over, and I was trying to get them off. I had like a little fork thing. And then suddenly the water drained out of the cove and the sets of waves came in. And I started getting smashed up on the rocks. And he literally like reached over and undid my weight belt, which dropped to the bottom of the ocean, and then grabbed me and started pulling me out because I was drowning. And if he hadn't been there and he hadn't been able to hold his breath, I would have died. We got back to the boat and my crew was like, wow, that was amazing. That looked great. And I was like, and then it was like the quietest boat ride back because he and I knew what had just happened.
How close a call that was.
Pretty wild. And he goes out there every day.
Yeah.
Because he's an expert and he knows what he's doing. And that shows like the different levels of like, I'm the stupid idiot and he's the guy who knows what he's doing.
Let me ask you this. You go through all that, you look death in the face, you're out there, you weight about the whole nine. Yeah. How delicious was that meal after all of that?
God, amazing. And that
changes the whole game.
It does. And just cooking something from scratch where you've actually harvested it all day, your body, I think, biologically starts to think about what's going to happen later. You're going to cook this meal, and then it becomes like an incredible, even just a salad, that you bring in and wash off and put together is wonderful.
Yeah, we were talking, I mentioned this briefly backstage, just something I was excited to bring up, is that you're obviously someone who was passionate about this before the show existed. It's why the documentary was made. But I'm curious, on the other side of all these experiences now, you talk about that baby squid kind of resting on your hand. How has this experience transformed you further? Where are you now compared to before you did any of this? Do you eat even less meat? What do you do now at this point?
So meat is the sort of like elephant in the room, and or in this case, the cow in the room. So it's hard. Like I love beef. We have an episode in Texas that's all about barbecue, and so I wanted to make a different episode with that one in particular because most of the shows that we do, we get a dish, the chef gives us a dish, and then I go hunt, gather all the ingredients, and come back and make it. And in that case, I didn't want to make just like a hamburger, kill a cow for a hamburger. That just felt really, not doing service or immoral in a way. And so I wanted to do a nose to tail across Texas. So we were going to slaughter a cow, and then I was going to make brisket and ribs and beef cheeks and turn the bone, marrow, and the hooves into gelatin, jello. And so, but first came the slaughtering of a cow. And so like, it would be hypocritical of me to eat meat and love meat as much as I do, and then suddenly at the last minute balk. And it was the most emotional, hardest experience of my life, like really heartbreaking. And so in response to that, I have dramatically cut back on, so I try and eat vegetarian or vegan like 5 or 6 days a week. And I give myself one day where I do eat meat because I love it. And I think that, I'm not a person who's now suddenly like, oh, you can't eat meat. I think people do. But we do need to think about it. And we need to think about the fact that A, it's bad for the environment, B, it's bad for us. And then C, like our relationship with the animals has changed over time. We used to think of them as just for us to consume. And now we know that they're smarter, than we ever thought they were. And we raise them in conditions that aren't great, and that cruelty. Also, we need to think about that too. So, I want to try and use meat more as a condiment, not as a main dish. And if I do, it's going to be special, and I'm going to pay money for it.
Yeah. How much research did you guys have to do going in? Because I think maybe the documentary side of you is like, oh, it'd be great from a documentary side to sort of stumble in a place that isn't doing this in the best possible way. But also, like, how do you make sure that you're not going there to do what you set out to do, and then you find another story along the way of like, oh, these guys aren't taking care of these animals, or like, how do you source the places that you're going to go so you could tell the story that you want to tell?
A lot of it starts with the chefs. The chefs are really researchers who've been researching for years. As they find their great partners in the food that they're making, and they send us on the journeys with these certain people. And then in certain cases, we kind of have an idea of, like, so we went to Finland, and Finland is ranked #1 as the happiest country in the world, and it's ranked really high in education. And so I wanted to think, does the relationship with food and nature have anything to do with either of those two things? And that was a kind of a thread that we could follow through the journey. And I think, it does. Again, I'm not an expert, but we met with people who would basically be like, and in the end, it's a lot of common sense. If kids get fed school lunches, then they're not starving through their day at school, and they're able to think better. And then good food also is better for your brains. And so there is a direct relationship with sort of like whole, eating whole meals, whole natural foods, and their happiness and their health.
You worked with, your wife worked with you on this, right? You guys are co-creators on this project? Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
You guys work together a lot, or was this the first time you collaborated on something? Because I know.
This was the first time that we collaborated on something, yeah.
Nice.
And it actually stemmed from her idea.
Really?
Yeah, we were gonna do a, in the Jay Gold theme of things, we were gonna do one potluck where everyone was gonna bring stuff to the house. Right. And we have some friends who brew their own beer at home. And so we said, what if we give everybody a challenge that they have like 3 or 4 months to bring something that they grew back, and we would make a from scratch dinner. And then she said, well, why don't you film it? Because I produce other stuff, so why don't you get your DP to come down and film it? And I was like, oh, I don't know, we'd have to raise money for that. But that was the seed.
Yeah, that was kind of the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty amazing.
And I lean on her a lot. I mean, I basically, I go off on weird tangents of things that interest me that everybody else is like, why are you doing that? So she always kind of keeps me back into like, this is a conversation between you and the audience, And if I'm not understanding what you're saying, then that's, so she's definitely like, I throw stuff up against her and she tells me whether it's going to work or not.
That's the other thing I was curious about too. Is just like you've been in front of the camera, you've been behind the camera, but I don't know that I've seen you host a lot necessarily. At least the way you do on here before. So it's a new muscle that you've got to flex and sort of work out and figure out. Were there any transferable skills from your career that helped you when it came time to being the guy?
I think I learned along the way. I think. So I've been going in and out of rooms and talking to people since I was 12 years old. I mean, that's what auditioning is in a sense. So it was there, but like being able to curate and guide like you do, that was new to me. And then to have sort of like a theme and follow the thread and not get thrown off course into these like, oh, that's an interesting rock over there. Let's look at this. Like I had a job to do. And so that was kind of new, and I can see it in the episodes. Like as the episodes progress, I think early on I leaned a lot more on the chefs and the experts that I was working with. And then later on, I felt comfortable kind of taking the reins and directing where I wanted to go, where I thought things were more interesting.
Did you guys already, do you have like a list? All right, here's the first 10 episodes, God willing, knock on wood. What were some of the next destinations, the next meals? Do you know the meals before the chefs tell them to you? Or do you try to keep like some of like almost like a game, like you'd find out in the moment?
Yeah, the chefs draw up 3 meals for me to go through, and I talk through with them. Yeah. But what happens is it's all seasonality. It's all like, so we literally harvest if we don't have it, it doesn't go in the meal. But we do have a pantry where we can bring things back that we've already gotten. So like salt we got in Iceland, and that can keep going across. So we give the chefs, these are a list of the things we haven't really gotten yet. So those can be main themes in the episode. These are things you can use as sort of like you don't have to, you can include them in the dish, but they're not going to be what we're going to focus on. And then, so I think one of the things that everybody shares is, I mean, people love food in general, and they'll go, oh, you got to do this dish, or this is the restaurant you got to go to, or this is the country that you got to go to. So you'll sit at like a dinner party, and pretty soon everybody starts giving you don't have to do any work. They list it out. They're like, this is the restaurant, this is the country, this is the dish you should have, and then you reach out and see if that's it.
Is there an item from that amazing pantry of all these curated, from scratch things? Is there an item that you had that once you came home, it's so hard, you can't go back? It was a lot of work to get the salt from Iceland, but it's the best salt I ever had. I can't just buy Morton's. I got to get something else.
I've ruined. I can only source everything myself now.
That's what I'm saying. Was there at least one item that ruined stuff for you when you came back? You're like, oh, it's so much better when
so Americans don't get this. I've never seen it here. The wild strawberries in Finland are this teeny, and they are like as if these big strawberries we have are kind of bland. It's if you took that strawberry, all the taste, and you put it into this little mini, and you put it in your mouth. You find them on the side of a trail, and it's like, pow. And my young son got to go to Finland. That was and we literally like put him on the trail. I don't even think he could crawl really at that point. And we sat him next to a strawberry patch, and he just pulled these off. And now, whatever, 8 months later, strawberries are his favorite fruit. And I think it's because of this moment in time where he sat there, picked it himself, put it in his mouth, ate it, and it was all him doing it himself. Kind of like what I'm doing, on each episode. Yeah.
Pun intended. Yeah. Did you find out, I'm sure there's a long list of reasons why, but why they're so condensed and better? Like what they're doing differently, other than how we mass produce them or something?
So we breed for, we breed out irregularity. We breed for beauty. We breed for size. Americans like things to look bigger, and you don't want there to be such variance that people don't know what they're about to purchase, right? So these wild ones, kind of like some will be sour, some will be sweet. They're teeny, so they, if you're gonna pay $10 for something, you're gonna be like, "What? I got like 6 strawberries," and there's a big difference between the size. So it's kind of like different varietals, like heirloom tomatoes that people are getting into these days. The tastes are kind of like not what you're expecting. And if you're okay with that, if you are not scared of trying something new, then there's some really cool stuff out there.
Some really cool stuff in here, man. It's a fascinating show, amazing adventure, and so many amazing things that I've never seen before that I get to see you do. It's very cool. So congratulations. We're not done yet. We're going to do some audience questions. We're going to get to those. But before we do, just remind everybody that I believe, when can they see the show?
Sundays at 6 p.m.
Sundays at 6 p.m.
Yeah, on FYI.
Yep, there we go. Perfect. So we got our first question coming to us from JP. I believe we've given you a microphone, JP, so what's up?
How are you, David?
Good, how are you?
I'm really impressed with your craftsmanship and pulling all these ingredients together. Just wondering, how is your taste buds? Have they gotten better?
How's your palate?
How's my palate?
Palate doing these days?
Yeah, like it's kind of ridiculous. It's an excuse to go and sit with these like incredible chefs that it's hard to get a reservation there, and then they make a meal with you, and you learn some like tips of the trade as you go along, and there's such expertise that's happening using like this Finnish chef was using. He would take horseradish, blend it up into like a horseradish milk, and then freeze it with the nitrogen, right? So it would have these little pellets of balls of horseradish, and then drizzle it on top of this scallop dish that we had, and it was like, holy smokes! I had never seen or tasted anything like it. Yeah.
That's wild. Was there a dish that you wouldn't traditionally eat, but because of the circumstances you tried it? Like, are you a finicky eater? You eat everything?
So.
Oh no! What wound did I reopen? I'm sorry.
So my crew suddenly we'd go around and suddenly they decide that it was going to be like bizarre foods where David was going to try weird stuff on camera, and so we made an agreement that if I was going to eat something, they had to eat it too. So
dangerous agreement.
Yeah, but they had worse constitutions than me, so they took the hits mostly. But in the Philippines, we had balut, which I don't know if you know what balut is. No. So it is fermented duck embryo. So it's in an egg, and the duck is at some point from being like a yolk, like an egg that we know it, and the bird. And
in between those two.
Yeah, and they literally it's called 1 day, which means it's a little pre-hatched bird, but it goes all along this route, and you don't really know at what level you're going to open this up at. And that was pretty terrifying. In South Africa. So a lot of my crew was South African, and they really wanted me to try this to torture me. So we went to a township. We did an episode in the township outside of Cape Town, and there the delicacy is it's called smileys. They take a sheep's head, and they boil it, and then take a blowtorch, and so the sheep gets.
It's a very misleading name. That is.
It's the opposite of the smiley.
Very happy name for a
terrifying thing.
All right, so they take the head.
So you can eat the cheeks. So that's people eat beef cheeks and pork cheeks and stuff. That's a thing. So sheep cheek is fine, and then the eye is also eaten.
Oh my god!
And that was horrific.
Wow.
And so I had to eat it. My host Sam, whose wife ran the restaurant that we were doing, we did this restaurant, amazing restaurant in Kailicha. She's doing incredible things down there. She just was chosen as one of the top 30 chefs in the world by Food and Wine, and her husband runs the restaurant with her, and he took me out into the township to have smileys, and at the point where he was like, so do you want to eat the eye? I was like, absolutely not. I don't want to eat the eye. Do people eat the eye? And he's like, yeah, people eat the eye. And then I was like, oh my God. So, and it wasn't worth it. I'll just tell you. It wasn't worth it.
Neither one of those stories ended with surprisingly good.
Yeah, exactly.
They both ended with, I was terrified. We got at least one more. It's coming from Sergio. Sergio, we gave you a mic as well. Where you at? Go for it.
Where's your favorite place to travel for ingredients and recipes?
Wow. I think that what's a really amazing travel experience mixed with a food experience was Iceland, because it's a truly incredible, like it's an adventure. You've never seen anything like it. The environment itself is wild. It's like you've landed on the moon, and there are sandstorms followed by blizzards, followed by a midnight sun that never goes down, and it's so surreal. It was as a city person, it was completely. I've never seen anything like that. And at the same time, we were diving. We were like diving in fjords for scallops and clams, and seals would be zipping by. And the guy who we were diving with had seen a whale in the fjord like a week before. And then there are geysers and volcanoes. So just in terms of both a really interesting food culture that no one really knows about, Scandinavian food culture, there's not that many restaurants here. And then the adventure side of it too, I would say that's pretty mind-blowing.
Great questions. Thank you, guys. Before we wrap things up, where do you, having done this, like now you and your wife sit down, you go, all right, we need a week off. Where do you go? What do you do at this point? Like, what's relaxing?
It's like basic. It's like Miami, Vegas, something like that. Something we can lay by the pool and like chill. Because we really get our sort of adventure fill.
The other 11 months.
Yeah, exactly. In the job.
Sure.
The job.
Man, well, this show, Sundays on FYI, is fantastic. I know you got a lot of irons. If anything else you want to tell people about before you get out of here?
Yeah, my business partner and I, we produced some other films. We just have a film that was nominated for an Indie Spirit Award, Wild Nights with Emily. It just came out into SVOD, so check that out. And then To Dust also is going to SVOD, that one Tribeca this year. It's amazing. Matthew Broderick movie, really funny and sweet.
Very cool, man.
Yeah.
Come back, talk about all these projects.
Yeah, definitely.
So
Next
nice
time.
to have you here. Thank you guys again for being an awesome audience, and thank you to those who tuned in and watched at home. It was great to have you as well. Keep an eye out Sundays on FYI for From Scratch. It's an awesome show, and you were an awesome guest. Make some noise and join me in thanking the great David Moscow for being here.